Hey folks, and welcome to this video in the Profile Builder series, where we will explore conditional properties. Now, as the name implies, conditional properties allow properties in Rhapsody to take their value conditionally. That is, rather than having a fixed value, Rhapsody can evaluate what that value should be based on some condition. Now, that could be the currently applied perspective, it could be other property values, it could be tags, environment variables, entries from the Rhapsody INI file, or even project data. They're really powerful, but they're very complex to write, and as usual, the Profile Builder will make using them much easier. In this video, we'll look at a couple of simple examples, starting with perspectives. We'll have use case diagrams change their background color according to the currently applied perspective. Now, I've already imported the property that controls the use case diagram background color, just as we did in video 2 of this series. Now, I've imported that into a separate property file just to make it easier for us to see what's going on. But of course, you can have any organizational strategy you like for your property files. Now, the default value in the factory property file for this property is this kind of grey background colour that Rhapsody uses for all of its diagrams. Let's change that, and we'll do it conditionally. Now, so we can work graphically, let's add a new conditional property diagram. We'll call that UCD. Next, we'll add two conditional values. We'll have one called red, and we'll have another one called blue. So that's going to control the background color. And if we look at the tags for one of those, we can see that there are plenty of options for configuring them, all of which are explained in the help files. Now, each of these will hold a value that the fill color property we imported might take. We're going to put that directly into this true value tag. Now, those are RGB values, so we can enter them manually. For example, in the red conditional value, I'll add 25500, which is just pure red. But we can also use another Profile Builder helper to select them. For the blue, I'll invoke a color picker, and I'll simply select a bluish kind of color. Next, let's associate these two possible values with the property. So we'll drag the fill color property onto the diagram, and we'll use this has conditional value relationship. Now we have a property that has two possible values. So now we have to define the conditions for those values to be used. Now, there are lots of ways to do this as well. In this example, we're going to use the perspectives we created in the last video. So let's drag both of those onto the diagram. And now we can add a checks value dependency to make the value conditional on a specific perspective. So if we're in the networking perspective, the property will take its value from the red conditional property. If it's in the no filter perspective, then it will take the blue. Let's now save that model to regenerate the property files. Before we test it, let's see what that looks like in the PRP file. So I'll open the root PRP file along with all of its includes, and there is the Conditional Properties PRP file, where we can see the value of the fill color property will be evaluated based on the current perspective. Now, even for a simple one like this, the syntax is pretty hairy, and it's not something you would want to write or maintain by hand. Okay, let's test it. Let's open the user project, and there we should find that changing the current perspective also has the effect of changing the background color on our use case diagram. Now, one thing to note is that technically Rhapsody only supports conditional properties for string type properties, although they do seem to work for colors as well. They certainly don't work for other types like Boolean properties, which is a shame, as they would be really useful there too. In the next example, we'll change the header in our use case diagram frame based on the value of an existing property. Now, we can see it's currently using the default value for non-SysML projects, which is simply the name of the diagram. Let's switch back to the Profile Builder project and we'll change that. This is the property that controls the overall content of that header. Again, I've imported that from the factory PRP file, and we can see the default value is simply the name. Let's drag that property onto the diagram. Well, I can use the same diagram, or I can create new diagrams for clarity if things get complex. Let's create a new conditional value. We'll call it UCD header. And again, we'll add a new has conditional value to make that thing conditional. Now, the condition we're going to check this time is a property. Now, we can use any property. I'm going to use the one we added way back in video 2, which was networking, automation, auto setup. And we'll add that checks value dependency to have our conditional value look at that property value. And we can now specify the values to use, and there are multiple ways to do that. Let's open the tags for our conditional value. In the check value tag, I'm going to type true. This is case sensitive, by the way. And then in the true value tag, I'll supply my own value manually. So let's say $name, we'll take the name of the diagram, but we'll put automatic in brackets after it. So if the property that we're checking is true, we'll use this text. For the false value, I'll use something a little more interesting. Let's create a new project data model element. And in its tags, let's select some piece of project data. Let's select project name. Now there we can also use things like other properties. We can use environment variables, even Rhapsody INI file entries. Now let's add an if-false relationship. So this isn't a simple piece of text. If the property we're checking is false, then the header will take its value from the current project name. Okay, let's test it. Let's click Save to regenerate those property files, and then we can switch back to the user project. Let's look at that diagram header. Currently, it's showing the name of the project. But let's open the project properties, and we'll locate that new property that we added. That, of course, is in our properties perspective we also created. And let's set its value to true. Now, Rhapsody won't automatically refresh diagrams if they are open. So let's locate that in the browser, and then we can close it, and then we can reopen it. And now it shows the alternate value, which was the name of the diagram, followed by that automatic in braces. So these are some simple examples. But conditional properties may be nested. They may be made conditional on other conditional properties. They may be grouped by and or operators. We can get quite complex with these setups. And in the hands-on workshop, that's going to walk you through some of those concepts. Well, that's it for this video. In the next one, we'll take a look at how we can model context patterns and use them to generate queries and tables.